Hey, it's Educator Barnes, and today is Veterans Day. And in complete transparency, it's been a tough day for me, even though it's still mid-morning now here in Eastern Standard Time. One of the things I do every single morning when I get up on my personal Facebook page, I have a personal one and a public one. I go and check my memories. And so when I went to check my memories this morning, it's just like all of these pictures of my dad because I would post pictures of my dad every year on Veterans Day. So there's just so many pictures and so many memories. And I had already been thinking about my dad because I had a big moment earlier this week. I'm a doctoral student. I've been a doctoral student since 2018. I'm studying in the Literacy, Culture, and Language program in IU Bloomington, and I'm getting close to being done. I passed my qualifying exams, which is a huge deal because that moves me from doctoral student to doctoral candidate. So I only have a few more steps, big steps in the process before I am at completion. And throughout this whole entire doctoral program, anytime there was any milestone, and that could include the end of the semester when I got my grades, I would call my dad. He would know many times how things went, even before my husband, even before my kids. So when that happened this week, I was filled with joy and also sadness because the closer I get to completing this program is the closer I get to graduation, and the closer I get to that moment, I'm reminded that he will not be there in physical form to root me on. So I thought today would be a great day to talk to you about an interview I did with my dad back in 2017. I am a writer for NEK 12. I'm also the editor in chief. I don't say that enough. So, for the people who claim I don't say it enough, there you go. And I decided to interview my dad. If you know anything about writing journalism, you typically interview somebody, you send it in to the editor, and it gets edits, and then it gets published. To get this interview for my father, he had a huge request that he had to be able to read it before publication. And I was like, Dad, that's not how it works. And he's like, well, those are my terms. There was actual plus because I agreed to it because I really wanted this interview. There was a plus to that. And that was when he went back to read what he said. First, he was like, okay, you captured me pretty well, because my dad is just very straight. But then it triggered his brain about additional statements. So many of the statements that are in this article that I'm about to share with you, my dad actually typed and added himself. He also provided photos. The first time I learned that my dad was in combat during Vietnam was when I was in middle school. In middle school, I had a teacher who asked us if we had any parents who served in the military or who had been involved in any conflict, and would they be willing to come to school. My dad was not willing to come to school, but instead he actually wrote in a few pages about his experiences during that time. And that was the first time I had even known that my dad was in Vietnam. I knew that he went to the military. I knew that he was a Marine, but I did not know that. The next time my dad talked to me about Vietnam in great detail is when we started working on our family history book for his mother's side of the family. And that's when my dad really went through what it was like to be a Black man fighting in combat when there was rampant racism around, and then what it was like being in a combat when there were so many people back home who were against the war, who thought it was wrong, and coming back. He kind of told me when we were doing our family history, said, you when you're in the military, your goal is to achieve the object, to achieve the task. And you come home and you expect to be seen as a hero or to be celebrated or to be thanked for your service. But because of all the negativity that was around Vietnam, he said there wasn't that type of energy and thoughts when he returned home. And I will also say November is Family History Month. So if you don't know some things about your family history, I would encourage you to learn. I started being a family historian when I was in my late 20s. So like, I don't know, 26, 27. And now I am 39, although my husband, like a few weeks ago, was like, we're in our 40s now. No, my husband is 40. I'm 39. I'm currently in my 30s, and I will be enjoying that whole entire last year of my 30s. But I've been doing it for a while, and it is super important when you think about family history that you don't wait to the last minute to learn your family history. You don't want to be doing that on somebody's deathbed. Here's Indy K-12. If you want to get to our website, you go to indy.education. And this is the article I wrote. It was called Veterans Day, My Father's Story. And there's my dad in his blues, his Marine blues and his nice uniform. My dad wore glasses just like I did. And he wore them a lot. So there are very few pictures of him without glasses on his face. So I just really like this. And there are very few pictures of my dad without facial hair because he loved his goatee. And we used to make fun of my dad about his goatee because he would when I was younger, so when my dad was like in his like 40s, he had like a stripe in his beard, but then the stripe started moving, and then sometimes it would be at the bottom. And then all of a sudden, when my dad got into his 50s and 60s, then his beard was completely black again. And I actually, because I like to low key like troll my dad, I would take photos of him over time and ask my dad about it, and he would just be like, I don't know what you're talking about, even though I had clear evidence that he was dyeing his facial hair. But I wanted to read this to you all today. Many people told me that they really enjoy when I read my articles, and there are some years I've been really good at adding the audio to my articles or doing the audio. And today, this is a way for me to process this day, but also a way to share history with you. So without further ado, Veterans Day, My Father's Story, written, published rather, November 11th, 2017. Veterans Day, originally called Armistice Day, is observed on November 11th each year to thank those who served in our military. According to the Veterans Day Teacher Resource Guide provided by the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs and the Veterans Day National Committee, there are nearly 20 million veterans living among us in every state and territory and from every walk of life. And counted among them is my father, James A. Stockton. For this Veterans Day, I decided to interview him to learn more about his time in the military. Why did you decide to join the military? I decided to join the military because Martin Luther King was just assassinated. Black people were depressed and losing hope. But I wanted to attend Lane Technical Institute to study drafting. It cost $2,000 for the program. I dropped out of tech high school and enlisted because mama didn't have that kind of money to send me. Why did you choose the Marine Corps? I chose the Marines because they are the first ones to go fight and take the objective. When did you serve? June 20th, 1968 through June 19th, 1972. And here's the picture of my father in 1969 in Vietnam at Vulture Hill. And all of his photos that he had, the ones that he still had in his possession at the time of this piece, he had dates on the back of them, which were super helpful. During your time in the Marines, you fought in the Vietnam War. What would you like to share about that time? One time we went on a patrol and we were looking for the North Vietnamese to make sure they were not going into South Vietnam. Charlie Company came under attack. We were asked to come and assist them. Our lieutenant told us to go directly through the tree line. You don't do that. We should have gone along the tree line. I was a squad leader at the time. To make it fair, each of the 4 squads in the platoon rotated being the point squad, the squad that leads the attack. On this particular day, my squad was point squad. When we went in, we were attacked. I got knocked down after getting hit in the chest. I also got hit in the leg. The rest of my squad didn't make it out. After I was rescued by reinforcements, I kept trying to figure out how I made it out because I knew I got hit in the chest. The reason I came out of that firefight was that I had a flak jacket on. I had my 2 bags of grenades wrapped around me. I also had my weapons, which were a M79 grenade launcher and a .45 pistol. When I later looked inside my bag, the bullet got lodged in one of those grenades. If that grenade would have gone off, I wouldn't be here right now. That's how I earned the Purple Heart. Secretary of State William Rogers was on tour at the time and presented me with the Purple Heart aboard the USS Repose, but I don't have the medal now. Later, after I recovered, we were attacked and we lost our belongings, and that included my medal. Being awarded the Purple Heart helped pay for your college. Because I received the Purple Heart, my children were able to have their college tuition covered. The only time we were on patrol that we never came under attack from the North Vietnamese was when we were patrolling with the ROK Marine Republic of Korea. The reason why the Vietnamese would not attack us when we had the ROK Marines with us, because the ROK Marines would kill everything in the village. Mama son, papa son, and baby son, and all living animals. When I returned home, I received a letter with the presidential seal on it from President Nixon, thanking me for my service. I was over there in Vietnam, December 1968 through December 1969. And this is my father with other Marines at Camp Pendleton, California, where they did their Marine training. How do you become a squad leader? They will bring the white guys in, automatically give them promotion over us. And we have been out there fighting for almost 6 months. 5 or 6 of us black guys refused to go out and fight. The staff sergeant who was over us said that we could go to the brick for that. We asked them, who are you going to send to get us? We were the baddest things out there. Then he promoted me right there on the spot. Racism was everywhere, but you always have to stand up to that kind of mess. That was what Martin Luther King was all about. What reflections do you have about fighting in the Vietnam War? If you look back at the Vietnam War, the Americans were supporting one side, which was the South, and the Russians and Chinese were supporting the other side. All 3 of these countries' economies boomed. The Vietnamese did not have a clue what was going on, and they were the people who suffered. No one kept count of how many Vietnamese were killed in this war because the United States considered Vietnamese casualties as collateral damage. We did not create a democracy in Vietnam. The only thing we left was death, destruction, and American-sired babies. We are doing the same thing with North and South Korea today. The Americans are supporting the South, and the Russian and Chinese are supporting the North. If war breaks out, all 3 economies will boom again. And if there is a ground war on that peninsula, the Korean casualties will be considered collateral damage. The Americans are also doing the same thing in Palestine. They are giving one side weapons to commit genocide against the other side. We don't agree with what the Germans did to the Jews, but this was for a shorter period of time, which is a grain of sand compared to the 400 years of slavery that happened to Black people in this country. They are sending Black people's taxpayer money to Israel to buy weapons to kill Palestinians, who are other people of color. Black people should not have to pay taxes in this country for a minimum of 800 years because we have already worked for 400 years for free. Our tax money should be going into our schools, our businesses, our neighborhoods, and supporting Black culture. Fighting in the war makes you think about history and American actions, such as the genocide committed against American Indians, another group of people of color. This picture right here is one of my favorite pictures of my dad. This was taken in South Carolina while he was still completing his Marine service. What did you do once you returned from Vietnam? When I got back, I went to Parris Island, South Carolina. I was a cross-country chaser. If some guy deserted and went AWOL, I would pick the guy up from the sheriff after he was caught and return him to the base. Later, I was transferred to Camp Lejeune in North Carolina. When did you finish high school? I took classes while at Camp Lejeune and got my GED there in June 1969. Were you able to save $2,000 to attend Lane? When I came back, they had closed Lane down. Instead, I went to IUPUI for about a year. IUPUI was a new college when I got out, and I thought it was going to be the best choice. That's when IUPUI was on 38th Street, right across from the fairgrounds. They were very racist back then. I studied drafting, and the drafting instructor I had gave me and this other Black guy who was from Vincennes, Indiana, a failing grade for the course, even though we had passed every assignment. When we went and protested to one of the deans at IUPUI, the dean said they have problems with the instructor, and that's why they had to let him go. Then we were told there was nothing that could be done about our grade. We both left the school after that. Then I used my VA benefits to go to Ivy Tech. And I took some drafting courses and machine and tool and earned an associate's degree from Ivy Tech. I was able to transfer some of my credit hours from IUPUI to Ivy Tech. If I would have known it was going to be like that at IUPUI, I would have gone straight to Ivy Tech when I got back. That's just how it was. You had to fight racism everywhere back then. Sometimes I look at how kids are now in school, and we had to fight for everything, and they just take it for granted. We lived through lots of racism. Some of these kids are into some crazy crap. They're focused on getting tattoos, they're living in the virtual world and doing everything else they can except getting an education. Some that do get an education don't understand how to use it. It's very discouraging. Mama used to say, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. We kick that door open and they won't go through. You need a good education to get ahead. Do you do anything special on Veterans Day? This is Clarence Richardson, aka Bojack. This is my dad's uncle and my great uncle. No, not anymore. I used to go downtown with my Uncle Clarence because he liked to walk in the Veterans Day Parade. He was a World War II veteran and he loved doing it. Since he died, I don't do that anymore. I was glad I had the opportunity to learn more about my father's experience in the military and how he stood up to racism. He takes education very seriously. My cousins always say, you can't see Uncle Jim without him asking you about school. Today, on Veterans Day, take time to thank the men and women who have served our country and how they fought to protect our liberties. As community members, lift up each other and support each other to make sure no one is wasting his or her education or opportunities to have a productive life and become a productive citizen. I really appreciate you all for taking the time to listen to me read that piece. That is one of my most favorite things I have ever written because there's so much that didn't get captured in that article because I had so many conversations with my dad after that. The military is a viable path. When kids finish school, a lot of times we're focused on college and career ready, but we need to be focused on employment in the job, enrollment into college, and also enlistment into the military. The military gives you many benefits that can be applied later to a career path or later if you want to go and receive a degree like my father did when he returned from his time in the military. So if you're listening today, I'm sure there's somebody that you know in your life that has served in the military. Take the time to thank that person for their service because without these brave men and women who are out here defending our freedom or going, because also the military is not even just about defending freedom. Many times they go to situations where there is a natural disaster. So they do so much for us, and many times they are seen as unsung heroes. So thank a veteran, and when legislation comes up that provides them with more benefits, more health care, whether that's mental and physical, or just tools so they can have a productive life, especially those who have served in combat. Because as my father said, you can't serve in combat and come back the same way that you left. We want to make sure they are well taken care of. So to all the veterans who have taken the time to watch this video, I thank you so much for your service and have a blessed Veterans Day.